And a very good morning to you this Thursday morning. We were just saying it's one of the busiest mornings that we can remember. There is a lot to get through, so we're going to get straight to it. A little bit later on, we're going to speak with Alan Quinlan. He's been talking with Michael Cheika, so we'll bring you some of that goodness. Andy Lee has picked his top 5 boxing movies of all time. There are some surprises and some hipster choices on the list. We'll get to those a little bit later on for you as well. Mike Quirk is going to talk to us to preview the weekend's Gaelic football action. We've also posited some potential Super 8 groups. Owen has left Tyrone out because he hates Tyrone because he's from Kerry. And that's about the highlight of the show today.
Well, it's more kind of based on the empirical evidence we've seen so far this championship that there is a very strong argument to be made that Tyrone are not going to make the Super 8 group. Kind of the way numbers work, we are not going to have a situation where all the biggest teams are going to avoid each other in the next round or the round after in the qualifiers draw. Somebody has to miss out.
Hot balls will provide everybody missing out. Pick the hot balls in this one, pick the cold balls in this one. Oh, Tyrone. Oh, Monaghan. Oh, you all avoided each other. That's a real pity.
The methods of Russian success are very, very similar to the methods of Super 8 success. Just look at Vitaly Mutko, GAA, and follow his lead, basically, is all I'm saying.
Explain who Mutko is.
Well, Mutko is is he like second in command to Vladimir Putin, but certainly head of the sports ministry in Russia, or was head of the sports ministry during the Sochi Olympics in 2014.
Not anymore. He got sidelined. He's head of buildings now.
Is he? Well, he's kind of been more prominent. He is the man who lurks behind Sepp Blatter in a lot of the pictures we've been seeing this morning.
I think that he's just travelling around with Sepp going like, here, and you built this, and we made this, and look where... Yes, we will have a good party tonight, Sepp. We brought the Fiesta.
He's kind of like a Bertie figure. If Sepp was to come here, it's like, look at all the great, crazy things I built.
I built that big bowl out there. Oh, no, I didn't get that one in the end.
No, it's
couldn't get that one done.
There was still a massive legacy of a bowl that was built here that was never built, in fact. Sepp, you would really enjoy that, the sentiments of that.
Yeah. All right, that's what's coming up for you a little bit later on in the show. Before we get to all that, though, we want to play you this because just thinking about it, right? If you were to pick an archetypal striker that would represent Fernando Hierro on the field of play, someone who looks like him, plays like him, is as much of a bollocks as him, Diego Costa would be the very man. And when Diego Costa scored last night, this is what Spanish radio had to say.
Jugaba para Silva, devuelve para Iniesta. Iniesta pase interior. Vamos Costa, vamos Costa, vamos Costa. Gol de España. 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 Diego Costa al limón defensivo. Marco Joseini. Diego Costa en el reverso. Gol de España. Ya se ven las cosas de otra manera. Marca España.
Yeah, so that was Marca Radio talking about the Diego Costa, fluky Diego Costa goal.
Yeah, it is a fluke. I'm trying to think of ways to justify the beauty of it, but it wasn't very beautiful, it wasn't very pretty, but that was the sort of game that required a goal like that. It was an utterly defensive performance from Iran for most of the game, and then in the second half they started to flaunt their stuff a little bit more. The guy doing the throw-in at the end doing a bit of a somersault before throwing the ball in, despite the fact that they're 1-0 down.
And then not being able to do it.
And then not being failing miserably.
That was the best part.
And somehow the commentators on RTE having the backwards, or the backstory and the knowledge to say he's tried that before and that he's done it successfully before. And I'm not sure where they've actually seen this guy do it before, but they seem to have made that point. I would have loved if he'd managed to put it off. I would have loved even more if they had scored that from that situation. And ultimately, it was a disappointing night for the neutral because of what happened with that VAR call. All that being said, the whole process of gathering great levels of enjoyment out of a team celebrating wildly and then getting called back because a goal was never a legitimate goal.
As Daniel Harris said, it was it's something that it's one of those things that you, until somebody points it out to you, you're like, oh yeah, sorry, I do actually really like that.
And even when it is a massive underdog, and it would have been one of the most beautiful stories we would have ever seen in the World Cup, it was still highly pleasurable to see all the Iranian players celebrate madly and then have the goal ripped away from them not ripped away from them. The goal was never notched on in the first place. It was never a goal. And
it wasn't their mind. So you were right. You're right. I felt a little bit of minor sympathy for them. But you've said they're going to win the entire thing. So Spain,
that is.
Yeah, not feeling so confident now this morning, surely.
Why?
Well, because they weren't that good.
Because they managed to break down a teak tough defence in Iran. and they created a few more chances. Like, they could have won that game 3-0 last night.
The emotional high of sacking the coach, getting the Portugal game, they come down after that and they're slowly going off the rails.
Like, my point is here, if anybody is similarly kind of invested in Spain, just relax. Everything is going to be fine. This is a different Spain team to the one we saw in 2010. If it was the 2010 team, they would have hammered Iran, and the reason for that is they would have had someone like David Villa, who would have been a little bit more in the thorn of a teak-tough defence, whereas Diego Costa just isn't that type of forward. Whereas, as we saw with Portugal, he can be a thorn in the side of a better team, a thorn in the side of a much better attacking-minded team. And when we get into the business end of the tournament, Spain are going to flourish.
I'm not sure I'm buying this logic. We'll see. Who does Spain have in the round of 16?
Well, Group A, so Uruguay or Russia. That being said, I wouldn't necessarily bet on an individual game between Spain and Russia now for Spain to win that particular match.
Would you bet on anybody against Russia at the moment, the way things are going?
On form, Russia are the best team in the World Cup, and
certainly they're the most active team in the World Cup. They've run the furthest distance.
They have run the furthest distance. They've got just such a great natural cardiovascular ability to run for long distances in Russia. It's down to being a huge country, because you can run anywhere in Russia. You can go to Siberia, there's nobody living there, and you can run forever and ever and ever. If we had those sort of facilities in Ireland, just a massive country, then we will be similarly fit as them. Surely that is the sole reason for this. Fighting bears as well, I heard, is another reason why they're so fit. If we had bears in Ireland, we would be just as fit as Russia, because we'd be able to fight bears. And, it's kind of like playing in La Liga versus playing in a crappy division. It's like you fight against the best, and fighting against bears is fighting against the best, sure.
Yeah. Okay, just want to move on and cover this quick story before we get to the newspaper, because it seems like the IRFU's anti-doping policy is a bit of a mess at the moment. So this is from their official document, 2016-2017 anti-doping policy. This is Philip Brown's introduction, the first 3 lines. The IRFU continues to invest in education and awareness campaigns around the dangers of doping in sport. We operate a zero-tolerance policy to cheating within rugby. Okay, so that's what they say. And here's a clip of Philip Brown talking about that zero tolerance in the aftermath of Munster signing Gerbrand-Grobler. Munster and the IRFU effectively signing Gerbrand-Grobler, because the IRFU have to sign off on a foreign player arriving into Ireland. And so somebody at the IRFU had to rubber stamp that and go, yeah, this is our guy. We want him to play for us, and we want him to represent Munster and to be a part of our rugby culture. So we interviewed Philip Brown around that time. Have a look.
You personally have been involved with the anti-doping within rugby for decades back now, and reading your reports, the opening line from 2015-2016 was, we've got a zero tolerance policy to this. That's not actually the case, though. You don't have a zero tolerance policy if you hire somebody who is a cheat.
Well, I think the first thing to do is to outline very clearly what the environment is here in Irish rugby. We are probably the most stringent country in the world in terms of rugby, in terms of anti-doping.
Why would you risk that? Why would you risk that?
Let me just explain exactly how our system works. We operate with Sport Ireland very closely. We have over 70% of the user pay tests are actually for rugby. We target very carefully who we test, particularly at underage level, to ensure that we have players coming through the system who are effectively clean.
Okay, so that's Philip Brown maintaining that they do have a zero tolerance policy towards doping in Irish rugby. But David Nusafora, who is the high performance director of rugby in Ireland, and obviously we're achieving great things with our senior international team. In the second part of the interview that he gave to the daily newspapers who are out in Australia, has said this: we don't have a zero tolerance policy to rugby at all. Now that's a paraphrase, but we would look at it and we'd look at the individual case of what's happened. I think it wouldn't be smart to put a stamp and say anyone who has had a doping conviction cannot play rugby here. That wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think moving forward, you continue to look at it on a case-by-case basis. You continue to look at it on a case-by-case basis is not a zero tolerance policy. That's fairly obvious. It's rudimentary use of language. In your anti-doping policy, in the documents that you publish, you say, we have a zero tolerance policy. But when the guy who's hiring people says, well, actually, we're going to look on it on a case-by-case basis, then somebody somewhere hasn't read the memo. There was another interesting part in the interview that we did with Philip Brown where we were talking about, you have to bear responsibility for this. And he was kind of making the point, well, actually, it wasn't on my desk. I wasn't the one who ultimately made the decision. So clearly Nusafora is coming out and defending his decision to hire Gerbrand-Grobler and say that actually, in that case, it was grand because there were extenuating circumstances. which means you don't have a zero tolerance policy, which means the IRFU have either not been telling us the truth about what their policy is, or there's been a breakdown in communication between the high performance director and the chief executive of the IRFU. So you pay your money and you make your choice about which of these parties you're going to believe, but certainly there is something not working and not functioning in the IRFU's doping policy at the moment, and I don't know what the truth is. Are you happy if we sign dopers into the future? Is that what we're going to do? It's like, come on down and you can say, well, you know, you did your 2 years, you made a mistake as a young man. It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, the point about taking drugs is that, like, it's not like a heat of the moment, a headbutt or a gouge or something which is grim, but part of the game that we kind of see, okay, we can punish you for that. Ordering drugs, taking drugs, buying drugs, finding out which drugs to take, that's premeditated. That's like, it's the same thing as like bringing a blood bag and trying to cheat the way Harlequins cheated. It's like that level of tampering with the game and with the fabric of the game. So the IRFU have decided that they don't have a zero tolerance policy, or certainly the guy who's in charge of signing players has said he doesn't have a zero tolerance policy. And we're going to have to wait and see what that means. The one case where I would actually take a doper is if they've played a role in educating people and said, I got this drug, I paid this much money for it, I took it for these reasons, it gave me these benefits. You can see the transformation in my body here, here, and here, and I will help to snitch on other people who are infesting our sport with it. In that instance, I'm like, yeah, let's get those people in, and they can come to the system and they can help train the people who are coming up about what the issues are, and they can help train the people who are trying to catch the cheats as well and say, you could check these people out because their pattern of behaviour is the same as mine was when I was doping. I would definitely be interested in having some of those people in the system, but otherwise, come on, you're poisoning the well.
Case-by-case basis is an interesting one. It wouldn't make any sense either, is kind of a line there that sticks out to me. What exactly does that mean? It wouldn't make any sense for us to not hire dopers whenever it suits us, as in the point of being high performance director means that high performance comes at any sort of cost, that no matter what is involved, no matter what is in your system, no matter what your history entails, as long as we're getting high performance out of you, it doesn't matter what your history is, it doesn't matter how badly you're poisoning our well. It's just...
So long as we're winning.
Yeah, exactly. It's very...
An excellent point.
It's a very strange comment that this whole thing... It's almost as if this is the real reaction. It's almost as if Nucifora hasn't had time to think about what he's going to say and is almost speaking from the heart here on this issue. Whereas with Philip Brown, there was time there. That was like, just to remind people of the context of that was a huge media operation that day in the Aviva Stadium. You obviously had John Delaney speaking about Martin O'Neill on the very same setting.
They were announcing the fact that Aviva was re-upping for another 5 years, and the biggest sponsorship deal in Irish society, not just Irish sport. It's like the biggest deal in sponsorship in Ireland, and that was a big day for them. And
so they could control the message.
But it got completely overshadowed, obviously, by the Grobler story.
Yeah, exactly. But like, there was thought put into that, whereas I think sometimes you get to see the real attitudes towards this a few months down the line when suddenly it's like, what about this? What about this thing? What are your actual thoughts on this, rather than the pre-prepared...
The moment,
yeah,
media trained stuff, which makes that a little bit more concerning, right? It's like, well, if it's going to help us win and we need to sign this player and he's got drugs in his past, so long as he spins us a yarn that we can go, yeah, that's fine, yeah, sure. Case by case. We're off the hook. We don't have to have a zero tolerance policy. So I don't know, if that's what everybody wants for Irish rugby, that's what you've got at the moment. That is the situation where the IRFU's printed documentation about this conflicts with what their high performance director is saying. That's a big conflict, and somebody somewhere has to clear that up. Otherwise, who knows what's coming down the tracks in the future. Because if you don't have a zero tolerance policy, you end up with sports like cycling, or who knows, maybe football. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Okay, so Ronaldo strikes again is the lead story on the Irish Times this morning. Messi's missed penalty hanging over Argentina. Yeah, Messi, what are you doing missing penalties? Like, Argentina are suddenly up against it.
Yeah, in what has I think at the pre-tournament, people would have kind of referred to this as the group of death, and then nearing the tournament, people are like, not really. It's Messi, and Croatia are in dire straits. It's going to be a battle between Croatia and Iceland for a second place, but Argentina are going to run away with it. And now it seems the way the results have permeated, it's looking like Nigeria are going to finish bottom. Croatia looking pretty good to qualify on the back of if they don't get beaten tonight.
But they look really good. I think, like, not just good to qualify, they look like a team that could actually go deep in this tournament. They've got like all the constituent parts, particularly over the course of a tournament. If everybody stays fit, they've got reasonable strikers, brilliant midfield, sound enough defence. All you need for a tournament.
Yeah, well, what I find very interesting about this is that quite often when you see disputes between the players and the fans, because a lot of the Croatian fans really hate the players at the moment, it actually doesn't matter in a major tournament. I know geographically it would make sense for a lot of Croatian fans to be present on the ground in Russia and to have an effect. But ultimately, it is a festival atmosphere. All that stuff is kind of sidelined for a time. It doesn't infect a squad as much as it can do with a club.
Maybe later on in the tournament. Like, it didn't help the Poles, obviously, that they had loads at their game. Croker Chiefs stall on training sanctions. This is a story from Martin Brownlee. He's been doing the rounds now for a little while. He's been kind of following up. Leinster braced for incredibly tough Champions Cup pool. The Champions Cup draw wasn't particularly kind to Leinster, and ex-Hull man Lenihan says mental health issues ended his career. This is an incredible story from Brian Lenihan, who played for Cork City, went to Hull and retired from football. He's only 24 years of age. He's given an interview to the Hard Knocks Sports podcast, which is Trevor Welch's podcast, and he says, the reason I did retire was due to illness, not injury. Unbelievable honesty from him, and a particularly brave thing to do, given that there is still, unfortunately, in Irish society, and in sport in particular, and in professional sport, a stigma around mental health. But he says that he attempted suicide, ended up in the Priory, ended up getting ECT. Actually, we can bring you a clip from Trevor Welch's podcast. This is the Hard Knocks podcast, and it's unbelievable stuff from Brian Lenihan, and worth a listen. Have a listen.
The reason why I did retire was due to illness, not injury. It's kind of a really dark period in my life. From say July up until December, I was struggling a lot with football and with lots of other things, and mainly my mental health. And on the 15th of December this year, I attempted suicide. And then I was brought to hospital and then transferred to the Priory Hospital in Altrincham, and I spent 3 months there. And I did 12 sessions of ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. So it was a really dark period, but one that, I feel lucky to have a second chance at life. It's something that not a lot of people know. Obviously, my mom, my dad, my girlfriend, my close friends and stuff, but nobody else really knows that. And I just was kind of torn between, when you asked me to do the interview, obviously you thought it was because of injuries as well, and I was torn between doing the interview and not, because I didn't want it to. I don't want to come across as being dramatic or having an excuse for the reason why I retired, and that's not the case. And the reason that I agreed to do the interview was to, I suppose, if I could help at least one more person and make sure that they didn't make the same mistakes that I did, because it wasn't like I didn't have a close-knit family or a good support network. I really did. I had such a good support network. But when you're in that state of mind, I don't think a lot of things can stop you from making silly mistakes like that.
That's the Hard Knocks Sports podcast, which you can access on SoundCloud, presented by Trevor Welch, and that's Brian Lenihan there, opening up. Unbelievable honesty, really. And like, even in that bit, it's very logical, the conversation that he's having with Trevor, where he's talking about the decision to go public with it. And so all you can do is wish him the very best in his recovery, and hope that it does help other people out there who are undergoing severe mental health difficulties to reach out, that there is a pathway for him 6 months after his suicide attempt to be chatting about it and kind of saying, actually, you know what, I think that maybe I can talk to other people about this and try and help them out of the difficulties that I was in.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like the natural step, but also just an unbelievably brave thing to do, to go on and actually speak about it in that manner. And it's awful to hear as well that he would say that, you know, the reason why he might not have done the podcast is because of how it might have been viewed in a more negative way, that people might have kind of second guessed the kind of authenticity of his story or something like that, which is an awful situation to be in if that's the thought running through your mind after you've gone through this. Like, it's only like adding fuel to the fire to a certain extent of what he's going through. It's horrible stuff, but it's like absolutely inspirational that he's actually like had the ability to go on the record now at this point. It's so close to what's happened as well. Like, this is only 6 months out from a suicide attempt, almost 7 months. So it's unbelievable bravery, and it's a brilliant listen. It's like a hard listen, but a brilliant listen.
All right, let's move on. We'll bring you the rest of the newspapers a little bit later on, but we want to go down to Australia. Alan Quinlan is standing by. We're going to get to him in just 1 second. First, though, he's already been speaking with Michael Cheika, and Cheika says he thinks it's going to come down to who can deliver in the heat of battle this weekend.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Ireland since I was there, you know what I mean? Like, the players that they've got, the extra level of coaching now that Joe's coaching there and taking them to another level. So I'm always impressed with them. It's not an issue, but I think that just delivering in the heat of battle will be the key, because both teams we're pretty evenly matched. We've got strengths in different areas, maybe, pretty evenly matched. And Ireland are probably a bit further along in their cycle than we are. But, I think it'll be about who can deliver the right stuff in the heat of battle.
All right, Alan Quinlan is with us. This is going to be a big battle. The team has been named, and there was an expectation in the build-up to the naming of the team that there wouldn't be that many changes made, but significant raft of changes, really, from an Irish perspective, Alan. What do you make of the changes that have been made?
A little bit surprised, I think, that they haven't gone with an out-and-out 7. Joe Schmidt in the press conference a couple of hours ago was talking about getting Jack Conan in there. He's fresh, hungry for work. He's a very good player, in fairness, very, very skillful, brings a real dynamic presence, and to put Peter O'Mahony and CJ Stander either side kind of keeps a lot of experience, a lot of grit, if you like, there. O'Mahony was outstanding last week, the 3 turnovers. He's not an out-and-out 7. He has played there before. But he has to, can he deliver again next week, this weekend at the breakdown? Because, and I said this to you last week, Ger, and I'm saying it a lot, it's not just your 6 and 7 who follow Pocock and Hooper, it's everybody throughout the team, your wingers, your outside centres. If they're clearing out a ruck, they have to be conscious of the fact that I think it was up on 30 times again last week that Pocock and Hooper had hands in and were hovering around rucks where potentially they sense an opportunity. So they're incredibly good at that. And they tried to disrupt Ireland, but Ireland were so good last week. So I think he's picked a team, and when you look at the team, it's a lot of experience, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of characters, leadership. Cutting edge is probably the question mark. Gary Ringrose being out of the side is, usually disappointing. I think you're back to the partnership that didn't function that well in Brisbane. 2 brilliant players, Bundyaki, Robbie Henshaw. And I think Robbie Henshaw, look, I love him as a player. I think he's just so abrasive, full of energy, power. He's all action. I think he got the timing wrong with 1 or 2 calls defensively in Brisbane. So will the Aussies try and exploit that again? Absolutely. So he's a big job at 13, not just defensively, but to try and exploit the opportunities, because I thought Ringrose was really good. They're different players. So the spine of the team is very, very strong there. I think Jack McGrath coming in for Team Healy, there's no major change there. Sean Cronin, maybe he can be put to bed now that Joe doesn't like Sean Cronin. And he'll have a real chip in his shoulder. I met him here in the hotel earlier, and he's just delighted. He was bringing a big smile across the face, and I hope he goes well. I think he's a great player if he can bring some of that Leinster form. So maybe the back row with that no out-and-out 7, Sean Cronin and Keith and the 13 situation are probably the areas that kind of jump out.
It's some environment for Ross Byrne to potentially make his first cap, because obviously there's no Joey Carberry on the bench if Sexton goes down, or as we've been seeing, if Sexton gets hooked after 70 minutes, if he's feeling tired or anything like that. Ross Byrne goes into a deciding test in Sydney. That is some environment to go in, isn't it, Quinny?
Yeah, some pressure cooker on. Somebody said to me today, what if Sexton goes down after 5 minutes? Well, we know a lot about Ross Byrne then if he has to come on. I think he will have benefited hugely from being involved with the squad in the Six Nations, training with the team, being on tour, seeing how the likes of Sexton operates, the likes of Murray, the preparation, the ability to sit. And he's had a brilliant year. He's played a lot of 10, so maybe there's no concern at all. I think obviously he's uncapped and he's the only player. He's the last player in the squad who's is going to have an involvement. So it's brilliant that Joe's getting him involved, but certainly a pressurised environment that he's going into.
Yeah, no sign of Joey Carbery being injured, so this is obviously just to give him game time.
Yeah, and I think, look, he's true to his word. Joe said before this tour that he's going to try and get everyone playing, everyone some sort of involvement. And, look, even if he only gets 5-10 minutes at the end, he'll feel involved if he gets on, gets his cap. I watched him the last couple of weeks and he's tugged out and trained and he's run out onto the field with him. This time he's going to be on the bench and he's involved in the matchday squad. So that's good for him. And like I said, he's been superb this year for Leinster when he's played. He's played up on 20 games at fly half. So it's not as if he's not familiar with it. Being in the squad, he'll have learned a lot. But it is different. The pace of the game, the pace last week, particularly towards the end of the game when Tadhg Beirne came on, when it's tough. It's tough because so that sometimes can be a bit of a shock. But look, his playing ability and his physical presence, the physical side of the game, he won't shy away from it.
What's Andrew Conway's situation? Because he was managed a bit through training this week. Was he injured as well? Like, do we know, is there a sense in Stockdale coming back in that that's his first choice, or did Conway do enough, or what's the story there, do you think?
I sense he was always possibly going to go back to Stockdale. Look, if Andrew Conway played really well, he likes Andrew Conway, Joe Schmidt. I like him. I think he's a great player. So unfortunate to get the injury again. It's bruising on the hip from the tackle when he scored a try. He didn't recover significant enough to train on Tuesday, and Joe spoke about that in the press conference, that Ian Henderson, Gary Ringrose, Andrew Conway, Dan Levy were all unavailable because of injury. At a push, maybe they could have trained later in the week, some of them, but not significantly enough to. And when you're only training 2 days, Jared, they're only training Tuesday, Thursday, likely it'll run out tomorrow. But the 2 days are the big days. Tuesday, that's where you get your shape. That's when you get a lot of heavy work done. Thursday is a bit of fine tuning from. So guys not being in the side would disrupt. So he's based it on those decisions, not being able to train. But Conway's unlucky, no doubt. But if you get that kind of bruising in your hip or that dead leg scenario, it's hard to shake it off. And unfortunately for him, he hasn't been able to.
The element of the amount of changes that we've seen between each game is interesting, Quinny, especially in the context of the World Cup. Do you think that Joe is kind of looking at things and thinking to himself, right, there's going to be a quick turnover between a lot of the games in the World Cup? Granted, we start with our two toughest games in next year's edition rather than the way it was in 2015. But at the same time, you look at it and you look at the quick turnover of bodies that happened in 2015, and that could happen again. And is he thinking about that when it comes to these three tests? Is he thinking about the turnover in bodies, or is it mostly just to get people to run out on this tour?
I think it's the turnover of bodies zone. It's trying to give experiences to guys out on the field at international level. It is a step up from provincial. The pace, the accuracy, the quality you're playing against, the time on ball. It's very hard to manage that and get everybody an equal kind of shot at it. But like some guys like Ross Byrne, look, he wasn't involved in the first two tests, but he would have ran with the team, ran against them. He would have been probably running Australian plays against Ireland. So even the training pitch stuff is money in the bank. And this tour, and like I said, Joe wants to try and develop that strength. If Johnny Sexton was out injured and Carbery was the starting 10, well, Ross Byrne could easily kind of, he jumps up the pecking order. He could be number 2. You never know. So getting guys game time, I think there's a fair bit of depth in the front row. A lot of back row options. The second row now, this year with the emergence of James Ryan, has given more strength there. Ultan Delan will have a say trying to get back into the mix for the World Cup. and a lot of outside back options as well. So you want probably 30 guys who are equal, very little between them. Historically, I was at 3 of them, and you have the kind of starters, then you have the bench, and then you have the rest, if you like, who maybe not perceived starters. So he'd love to go, and it'd be an ideal situation for Joe Schmidt to go to the World Cup and have, 25, 28 potential starters and to be able to rotate and mix. And invariably, you have a tough game, maybe a weaker game, tough game, weaker game, that type of scenario. So you kind of have to have two teams in your head. It'd be brilliant if you could mix and match. And look, there's a lot of guys, particularly in the forward, that there's not a lot of between guys, and we've seen with changes that there's not a huge amount in difference. So it's all about depth. And he wants to go to the World Cup next year. I know there's a lot of rugby to be played since with November internationals, Six Nations, but this team has achieved so much. Winning in South Africa for the first time, championships in 14, 15, Grand Slam, beating Australia for the first time in 39 years. I said that, but the one that'll keep sticking out is Joe Schmidt wants a semi-final at least.
Yeah. World Cup. You say there's a lot of rugby to be played, but there's actually 9 competitive internationals, after this one, before our first game in the World Cup, and that's it. Yeah. Now, obviously, there's loads of big, high-profile club games where the players can get played, but from his perspective, not a whole room for experimentation over the course of those 9 games, and very few players have made the team who would be first choice who have less than 10 caps. So you can't really expect a whole heap of change between now and then. Maybe 1 or 2 players might be able to force their way in. Maybe Tyke Byrne becomes a starter, who knows? But we're not a million miles away here from looking at what the lineup is going to be like, what the patterns of play are going to be, and maybe that's the point, that you can make 5 changes now, which is what the 5 changes were forced on him in that France game, from the France game to the Argentina game in the World Cup, and the systems will hold up against Australia and they'll still be able to win.
Yeah, and that's an ideal scenario, but every team has to cope with. New Zealand coped in 2011 when Dan Carter got injured, and they had a mad Aaron Cruden got injured, and they had to scramble for I can't think of his name again. What's his name, Ger? The All Blacks come in and started.
The guy who Ulster nearly signed last year, who failed the medical. Who was fishing? Who I also can't remember. We'll Google it there.
We don't want a fishing story in next year if Johnny Sexton or somebody gets injured. And look, you look at the back row. Sean O'Brien will want to get back. Josh van der Fleer. They're a couple of guys who will definitely want to try and get back in the mix. And so getting that depth in each position is an ideal scenario. I think the biggest beneficiaries of this tour have been Niall Scannell and Rob Herring. I think they're 2 guys now that if Rory Best wasn't available or didn't got injured again, that they could step up and put that pressure. So suddenly we've 4 hookers now: Rory Best, Niall Scannell, Sean Cronin, and Rob Herring, which is brilliant. So I think Herring and Scannell were brilliant in the couple of games. Yeah. So they're the big winners for this tour, who weren't kind of a little bit unknown about them.
It was Stephen Donald was the out half.
Stephen Donald, that
kicked the goals.
If Stephen Donald watches this, he'll kill us because we forgot his name. But you don't want a Stephen Donald situation. And look, at the end of the day, you're going to have injuries. You're going to have injuries next year. You could lose a second row outside backs, and you want as little disruption as possible. But we kind of have this tag of 15 now, don't we? Where we're going, we've 5 players missing. So I think just if we've enough of guys who have that experience who can step in. And who knows, Sexton might be starting next year at the World Cup. Carberry could be brilliant. Conor Murray could have a little bit of a downtime. John Cooney coming into the squad as well. Now that's highly unlikely because they're world-class players. But you never know what kind of form is going to be there in 14 months' time, 15 months' time.
We obviously had Stephen Larkham on the show during the week, and he's a very, very impressive character. Obviously a sensational player, but has clearly been able to transform his way of thinking about the game into his coaching, and like reading the Australian press, he's being groomed as the natural successor. Although there's pieces today, I understand, in the local papers in Sydney suggesting that Joe Schmidt is a possible.
Can I show you that headline?
Yeah.
Hopefully you can really see it down at the bottom.
Ireland's success puts Schmidt on radar for Wallabies coaching post. It's like, yeah, good luck, lads.
It's basically saying in a little over 16 months, Rugby Australia is likely to be faced with appointing a successor to Michael Cheika as Wallabies coach, but the solution might be right beneath their noses in Ireland coach Joe Schmidt. Basically, Cheika has said after the World Cup, if they don't have a successful World Cup, he could walk away. So yeah, they're giving a little bit of praise after, talking about Joe Schmidt's strength and that he could be on their radar.
Larkin was interesting in that I didn't realise that whenever you have those meetings with the referees, everybody's allowed to go. Like, both teams are supposed to have representatives at it. Is that the way it happens, or do most teams allow you to meet the referee on your own?
No, you can always request. I think you can always request to meet the referee on your own. There's no kind of secret here. It's kind of unusual that unless something is kind of irritating you about the opposition and something they do that you want to have a chat with, and you want to try and get on the same wavelength, and I suppose subconsciously you're trying to get him on side about the opposition or remind him about some kind of situation where they're offside a lot at the breakdown, or they're halfway up the ruck a lot, or they get off the line too early, or they push a little bit in the line out just before the ball comes in, or they do a bit of blocking, whatever the case may be. The coaches are analysing this with their coaches. They see stuff that they maybe think is illegal, that it's very hard sometimes for referees to pick up. But you highlight something like that, then it can come back to bite you if the referee starts looking, but well, they're doing this wrong, but look at where your player is standing as well. He's offside as well. So look, it's for clarity, and it's a good idea because you have a conversation with the referee, and a lot of the times the old school stuff, Joe, where a referee come into the dressing room, check the studs beforehand, and say, Joe Juge, for example, he's head of referees now for Europe, I think, and he's the French referee, and he's always come in and said to Stringer before a big Munster game, stop waving your hands when I'll decide if they're slowing up the ball, and so sometimes you can get a referee who, if you give him too much information, it can come back to bite you.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Pascal Gazer is probably the best referee of the three over these 3 weeks. He's a little bit calmer and confident. And look, I think Michael Cheika would have probably bought some stuff about the escorts running back in the kick retreat. Are they? Is it illegal? And if the referee, I don't think they're doing anything wrong. Every team does it. I think Stephen Larkham said that. But look, if there's a situation where there's a bit of blocking or sealing off at breakdown, you might highlight stuff like that to him.
Yeah, well, one penalty might turn the game. What's going to happen? We know you've got to go, so what's going to happen?
That's a good question. I don't have the old crystal ball that I can look into and say and predict it. This is very tight. It'll be a true test of where Australia are at. I was very impressed with them in the first game, given their physicality. Their athleticism is phenomenal. They have some freakish athletes out wide in Corabetti and Falau. Caleb Betty is a very underrated player. I think he's a really, really effective, brilliant player. Curtly Beale, on his day, he can be devastating, as he's shown a few times. But if they get enough of quality ball, they can hurt us. There's no doubt. And in retrospect, if we get that kind of outside channel defending, a bit more connectivity, it may be a strength for us because we're good at poaching ball. But I just think Ireland, I was really impressed with the way, the intensity they brought, the aggression, and I think they can bring it again. This side really believe in themselves, and I think if they get to the same level as last week, I actually don't think they need to get any better because they were just exceptional with the ball. The pressure that they put on Australia when they had the ball, but also their ball retention was super. 21 turnovers in the first test, 9 in this one. You're always going to have 7, 8, 9 because, invariably a loose ball, bad pass. But if they can keep the turnovers down to that level, I think we have the players who can control the game and win the test.
Happy days, Alan. Enjoy the rest of your time in Sydney. Thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, lads.
Alan Quinlan there giving us his thoughts pre-match from Sydney. Michael Kanani on Twitter is looking, can you give me a shout out? I'm flying up from Melbourne on Saturday morning and desperate for a ticket, please. So if anybody can sort Michael out with a ticket, it's sold out.
Yeah. The absolute neck of the Australian Rugby Union. Exactly, that's exactly what you can do a better impression. Just right from beneath our noses. Just
trying to steal what? Joe Schmidt?
Trying to steal Joe. As if Joe Schmidt would view the Wallabies job as a step up.
Good old job, isn't it? It's like closer to home, expectations pretty low, play a great brand of rugby, not as much pressure. You do have to talk to the media a good bit.
Yeah.
That might not go down. That might not be part of the thing that he likes.
Maybe maybe the Australian media is just less full of vultures than the Irish media, because that's what we all are, aren't we?
Yeah.
So he'd be free of praying birds in the sky if he moves to Sydney or wherever the Michael Cheika is based. He's going to become the next All Blacks coach. Maybe not the next All Blacks coach, but his next job is going to become the All Blacks. It's so obvious. There's an absolute path there. There is a script that has been written, and there is no deviating from this.
You're going to win the World Cup with the All Blacks. It's going to happen because you've got the best players and all the referees referee you completely differently from everybody else. What's the challenge there?
Well, actually dealing with the unbelievable pressure of being the favourites for the World Cup.
I think there's like crazy joy for all those players who win that, or is it like, oh yeah, oh, Jesus, thank God, as opposed to
well, it's relief, but relief can...
The changing room after Leinster beat Northampton after that second half turnaround, I would say is probably the happiest any team ever gets, because it's like they could have beaten us. We put ourselves really in the shitter there, and we managed to come back from it. And that's a 50-50 thing.
Yeah, but that's just the manner of the victory. Like, would the All Blacks deliberately go out to kind of sacrifice a massive early lead?
They would have won that game 60-0 and been pretty joyless about the whole thing and swept the sheds after they stamped people in the eye. That's how that would have worked.
That's just Richie McCaw.
Right. So here's an interesting clip from Dubs TV. Somebody very important has made a bit of a comeback.
Well, on that journey, they showed great team spirit, great character, and they played very good football. And it's going to be be a tough game. Great to see Bernard Brogan back in the pitch again with us, and that's really positive for the team and for Bernard. And he's doing Trojan work behind the scenes. Hopefully, we'll still win the competition when he returns.
Yeah, that was Bernard Brogan. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that he was doing the resistance bands in the middle of that. Looks pretty good for somebody who's just 4 months out for surgery.
Yeah, hopping on one leg. It must put the fear of God into the likes of Niall Scully and Brian Howard, and to a certain extent Paul Mannion and Conor O'Callaghan, looking around and saying, oh, look at that, one of the greatest players of our generation hopping on one leg around the training ground. Soon enough he'll be hopping on 2 legs. Soon enough he'll be kicking off both legs. And soon enough, my place is in jeopardy, serious jeopardy. So this weekend, we need to go out and we need to absolutely pulverise Laois to ensure that my place is safe in this team.
He's also only 34. It's clearly unbelievably dedicated and wants to get back in the team. Like, the notion that he's finished because of the injury I think we all bought into the notion that, okay, but you do fall into the trap of he's actually only 34. And if he's looked after himself the way it looks like he's looked after himself, then he could easily go on and book the trend of somebody who feels like they have to retire at 30, 31, 32 because of the crazy commitment. It's like a lifestyle thing, really, for a lot of these players who get into that lifestyle of looking after themselves. And so they're going to continue to do much of the training even after they stop.
In a strange way as well, I feel that the way he's set himself up now is kind of a lack of pressure on this comeback. He's got a good thing going on outside of the pitch with the pub and with the consultancy and all that sort of stuff. And with that, there is no kind of element that I am a Dublin footballer and that is the be-all and end-all. Whatever happens with this comeback happens. If I win another All-Ireland, great. If I play in another All-Ireland final, even better.
Yeah.
And I think with that, that relaxed, kind of the relaxed nature around his comeback, it's just beneficial for everybody, and it's beneficial for the squad more than anybody else.
I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he was sticking around for next year as well. Now, you've picked the official OTB AM Super 8 groups, and the massive raging controversy here. Group 1, Galway are going to win Connacht. Kerry, we know, are going to win...
Galway have won Connacht.
Yeah, sorry. Galway have won Connacht. Kerry, we know, are going to win Munster, according to you.
They might.
Fermanagh are going to get beaten by Donegal, according to this, and Mayo are going to come through the qualifiers no matter who they beat. So that's going to be a reasonable group. Galway and Kerry will be the first game in Croke Park.
Yes.
Yep. Do we know where Kerry will play Mayo in your calculations?
I think...
Okay, we'll let you work that one out.
Yeah, I'll work it out in 2 seconds.
Donegal are going to win Ulster, according to Owen. Dublin, we think, might have a good chance of perhaps squeaking it through against Laois this weekend in Croker. And then Roscommon and Monaghan are going to come through. And the eagle-eyed, as I said, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that there is no Tyrone, there is no Cork, there is no Kildare. I think we kind of figured that, not that big a deal. But no Cork. Kerryman hates Cork and Tyrone, picks neither Cork nor Tyrone to get through to the groups.
Well, Cork isn't a big surprise really there. You would have...
They're only going to win one game.
Yeah, so what? I mean, it's got to be a one game against not a Roscommon, it'll be against a Mayo, a Monaghan, a Tyrone. Like my point here is that I think Mayo and Monaghan are going up against Tyrone and Cork. What am I basing that on? Complete nothingness.
Oh, it's a draw.
Yeah. So I can't. I had to say somebody big is going to get knocked out. I wouldn't say that somebody big is Cork necessarily. I mean, they're not.
Tyrone are that big team.
Tyrone are the big team. Cork aren't a big team anymore. They will once again become a big team, but not at this present moment in time.
Yeah.
So there will be an occasion there where we will see a big game in the qualifiers. I'm just kind of speculating that it might involve Tyrone, and that Tyrone are susceptible to getting beaten by one of those bigger teams. And who that may be, it could be a Mayo or a Monaghan in round 3 of the qualifiers. Let's not forget, it's only round 2 of the qualifiers this weekend. They've all got to square up against one another after they all progress from this weekend. Who knows, Tyrone could get dumped out this weekend by Carlow. Stranger things have happened. Not many stranger things, but stranger things have happened. Mayo could get dumped out of the qualifiers by Tipperary this weekend. Again, very, very unlikely. But then it's an open draw for round 3 of the qualifiers, at which point I expect there to be a whopper draw for a Monaghan or a Mayo to go up against Tyrone. Or maybe Monaghan against Mayo, who knows? So it is all speculation at this moment, but I think it's fairly safe to say that Dublin are going to be there. And it's a little bit less safer, but still probably safe to say that Kerry are going to be there. And then Donegal Fermanagh is kind of the one that's still up in the air, but I'm picking Donegal in that one.
Micheál Quirk is going to talk to us about the actual football this weekend in a couple of minutes' time. Andy Lee has picked his top 5 boxing movies of all time. He's going to join us in studio in about 10 minutes' time. In the meantime, though, we're going to talk about Spain and the World Cup, and Dermot Corrigan is on the line to talk to us about their 1-0 win against Iran last night. Dermot, good morning to you. What's the response been like to the quality of performance that Spain put in last night so far?
Hey, Jared. People are not really that impressed by how well Spain played last night, or how not so well they played last night. Iran's approach got a lot of criticism on the TV last night, and also in the papers this morning, people talking about it as anti-football. Even Real Madrid right back Dani Carvajal had a bit of a go at how Iran played. But the more thoughtful pundits, I guess, are saying that Spain should be able to break them down, that they had so much possession. Spain are used to having a lot of the ball and having that type of a test. But especially in the first half last night, they showed very little really ideas of how to get through the well-organised Iran defence. And then when they did go ahead through a pretty lucky goal from Diego Costa, Iran came at them and had plenty of chances to equalise. So after the first game, I think people were pretty happy with how Spain had played. You know, they should have won, except for Ronaldo being, doing one of the best performances of his career in the first game. So people in Spain were happy enough with that performance. Last night they won, but there was a feeling that they're going to have to play a lot better if they're going to go deep into the competition.
Yeah, and so obviously the circumstances with which Hierro finds himself in the role, we all know how he got there, but what has the response been like over the short period he's been there? Because presumably he gets no criticism really for the first game. Does he start to begin to be analysed as an international manager now, as somebody who actually, regardless of how you got the job, and so you have to behave like an international manager? What's the sense of how he's doing?
Up until last night, yeah, he had got a pretty easy ride, and he's a very respected figure. Like, he's a guy who played so many times for Spain. He played at 4 different World Cups for Spain, won everything with Real Madrid as well. So he got an easy enough ride up until last night. Playing Lucas Vazquez got a good bit of criticism. He's a Madrid winger who came into the team and didn't do very well at all last night, got taken off. And some of the questioning after the game was around tactical issues that Hierro, it's not his forte, really. You feel a little bit for him because he has been plunged into the job, but organising the team, talking about tactics is not something that he's very used to, very comfortable. And a lot of the Spanish pundits love to get into that type of detail, especially the guys who were with the team after the game. There has been a feeling that some of the reporting from the guys around the camp saying that the Barcelona players are not really that happy with how the team are set up. It goes back to Lopetegui's time as well, with Costa in the team, to try and maybe to have a lot of the ball, but also to have a counter-attacking threat, to sit a little bit deeper than Spain are used to, and then try and launch Costa in behind. That doesn't really suit people like Busquets and Iniesta. And we saw Busquets struggle a lot last night when Iran were able to counter and get on the ball and hit Spain quickly on the break. So that's something that, I think is starting now to come out a little bit more. People are starting to talk a little bit more about the issues within the team rather than the politics around it, or rather than all the drama that happened when Lopetegui went and Hierro came in.
They do seem, however, Dermot, to have an undisputed superstar in Isco, who is in unbelievable form at the moment, who was, in my view anyway, Spain's best player again last night. And it is that sort of level of performance that you just need at this point to pull you through the group stages, to pull you through into the business end. And at which point, once they come up against better teams, you will get a version of Diego Costa like we got last Friday night, and potentially improved performances from Andres Iniesta, although that seems to be an entirely different discussion at the moment, considering he was taken off last night.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on Isco. He's been probably Spain's most creative player over the two games. He has that little bit of unpredictability that Iniesta and Silva and Busquets, great on the ball and lovely passing around in front of the defence. But Isco was the guy who was just trying little reverse passes, doing things that Iran didn't expect and getting through. And it's also fair enough to say that it's a kind of a different test. Playing against Iran, who are going to sit back and defend, similar enough maybe to playing against Iceland or Australia for France, is different than when you get into the quarterfinals and two of the bigger teams meet each other. And Spain will fancy their chances in those games when it comes down to it, especially with the experience in the team. But we don't know. It's really hard to say how they're going to go when it gets to that stage. On Iniesta, I think that, he's 34 now and he's leaving Barcelona to go and play in Japan, and he's kind of coming to the end. He doesn't have the gas to play 90 minutes so all the way through the group stages. So it's no surprise really that he's been the first player taken off in both games so far. Whether he'll start against Morocco, I assume so, but if he does, again, he'll come off at the hour mark, and the idea is to keep him as fresh as possible for when the bigger games do come along. There's nobody doubting his place in the starting lineup for the biggest games at the moment.
Has Hierro done any sit-down interviews? Has he kind of tried to seize the narrative around what's going on? Is he trying to meet everything face on? What's his strategy been since he's taken control?
He's done a couple of radio chats, like the Spanish radio, a bit like yourself. Spanish radio is pretty good. They do a lot of in-depth analysis to get the coaches and that on after the games. They go around and talk to the different radio shows, and he had a chat with a couple of them, over the last couple of days. His message has really been that he's trying to touch as little as possible from what Lopetegui did. He stayed out of the politics. He hasn't exactly backed the Spanish Federation president, Rubiales, who has gone very quiet. He's understandably keeping a low profile after what happened last week. But Hierro was trying to be kind of statesman-like and manage it and keep everybody happy. Again, without getting into too much detail, he hasn't kind of faced any criticism really so far in those interviews. They've all been pretty soft, and he's just trying to get across the image that it's all under control, that I'm keeping everybody together, that the idea here is that we're all a team. Nothing too spectacular in what he's saying, but the idea is to try and keep things as smooth as possible before they get into the bigger games in the tournament.
Yeah, because the video obviously came out of them doing the head tennis competition, and you're like, if you were to stage a video of a happy team celebrating together, doing something, then playing head tennis, trying to get the ball into the whatever that container was, is exactly what you would do if you were, part of a well-trained, well-oiled media machine.
Yeah, for sure. It's probably more interesting to look at, in El País especially, Diego Torres, who people would know as a guy who's done some pretty interesting reporting work on Real Madrid and Mourinho and Cristiano and Neymar and people like that over the years. He's out with the Spain camp for the tournament, and his stuff is maybe more interesting on looking at what's going on behind the scenes. It does seem that there was a bit of a split in the camp between the people who wanted Lopetegui to stay no matter what, which was kind of led by Sergio Ramos, and then the guys like Iniesta, Busquets, who are not so interested in the personalities or in who's in charge, but more about how the team is set up. Hierro is a guy who's very close to Madrid, very close to Ramos, and gets a lot of respect from the Spanish media because of that. Whether he has the tactical nous to organise the team or to change too much about how they're playing remains to be seen. There's a feeling that it's kind of going towards how Spain do in the tournament. If they keep going deep into the tournament, get to semi-finals or something like that, then Hierro's going to come out of it pretty well. It might even keep the job, but it all depends on their first big game, whether that's if they get somebody like Argentina or whoever they get at the quarterfinal stage, if they make it that far. that's going to be a time when all the pressures and all the real stories is going to come out, and we find out what people really thought about what went down over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Like, do you feel that it's better draw for Spain to finish top or finish second in this group, assuming Russia finished top and Uruguay finished second in Group A? Because you will get sort of this tough approach from Uruguay, a very, very tough defensive team to break down, but probably could well go through the entire group stage without conceding a goal. And then, of course, you've got the unpredictability of Russia. We don't know what they're going to do in the last 16. They could well cause a big scalp, and there will be no shocks whatsoever in the last 16. So I'm struggling to think if Russia is actually the better draw for Spain here, and that finishing top of this group, if Uruguay do finish second, might be a bad thing for Hierro's side.
Yeah, there's a couple of things on that in Spain, 2002 World Cup is still remembered a lot in Spain when they played Ireland in the last 16 and then got through, but then were knocked out by Korea as the host team. So Spain, in a very controversial game with refereeing decisions that went against Spain. Spain don't like to play the host country in the tournament. Something about the Spanish, they're pretty, what's the right word to use? They like their I'm not going to say paranoid, but they like their conspiracy theories and things like that. So coming up against a host team, especially maybe Russia in this tournament, is not something that they would look forward to. So they prefer to get Uruguay in the next round. Looking deeper into the draw, it does seem as if maybe a lot of the bigger teams, because of the way the results have gone so far, with Germany losing and Brazil as well, that a lot of the bigger teams might end up in one half of the draw. So if Spain do win the group, they would end up in the theoretically easier half of the draw and maybe face teams like Croatia, Denmark, teams like that as they go deeper into the tournament. So people are already looking at that. Maybe that's a bit too far ahead to go, but that's an idea of some of the way that people are thinking about it at the moment.
They're obviously looking forward with some hope. One final question for you. Leo Messi back in action, obviously, this evening after a grim enough start from his perspective. The missed penalty is hanging over the Argentina camp. Any news coming out in Spain about how he's going? Obviously very closely connected with certain journalists in the Catalan region. Are they reporting on him being unhappy or any of that kind of stuff?
Not so much that they're unhappy, but more that everybody's just baffled with Sampaoli about what he's going to do. There's reports coming out about ripping up the team, changing the tactics completely for today, going three at the back, dropping Di Maria, putting some guys into the team who wouldn't be so well known. Those journalists, and there are, there's plenty of them there who will support Messi no matter what. They're still on his side. They still think that if anybody can pull Argentina through, they can pull him through. But there's a feeling that he's going to have to do it on his own, that he's not getting any real support from Sampaoli, that nobody understands what Sampaoli's trying to do with the team. And it's kind of down to Superman Messi. If Argentina can do something, it'll be him pulling the team through on their shoulders rather than Messi getting the support that he needs to go all the way and win the tournament. He needs more support is what they feel.
So no pressure then. Dermot, great stuff. Enjoy. Thanks a million.
Cheers, guys.
Dermot Corrigan there from Spain, giving us some thoughts on what's going on with that. So maybe it is actually all working out in Spain. Denmark and Croatia on their side of the draw and nobody else.
Yeah, let's wait to see how the draw is turning out until we see every team twice. It's probably the moral of previous World Cups and the story of those. Like, tonight is going to be a sensational game, Argentina against Croatia. There's just so many different facets of it in terms of narratives off the pitch, that the on the pitch stuff, which is fascinating in its own regard, is almost playing second fiddle to the fact. Like Di Maria getting dropped is a no-brainer from Sampaoli tonight. It's got to happen. And is there just a simple matter here that there just needs to be a little bit more trust put into the 10 players around Lionel Messi? They're not crap players. They're not like Saudi Arabia or Iran. They're good players, are playing at a decent level, every single one of them. It's not like it's Lionel Messi playing with the team that Saudi Arabia put out a couple of nights ago or Iran last night. It's a different story here, and the cult of Messi is really bringing down that whole thing. Well, we'll see tonight against Croatia. Now, we're going to get to Andy Lee's top 5 boxing movies of all time in just a moment. First, here's Jim Gavin chatting to Maura Trossan-Nikali ahead of the Leinster final.
First things first, Jim, a health check on Stephen Cluxton. How's he doing?
Yeah, Stephen's doing great. Yeah, he's on the road to recovery. A little bit sore from that fall, but he's a very resilient man and determined man, and we'll make a call on it later on the week.
It must be very difficult on Evan Comerford to not be used to those kind of big days and all of a sudden having to go in without. Obviously, nobody expects Stephen Cluxton to come off. Yeah,
he was very composed. I said a few words to him before he went in and didn't bat an eyelid. So I think what you saw in the game was probably reflective of what we see in training, and probably what you saw in the league games that Evan played as well. You know, very solid character and great attitude. That's why he's with the squad, and great work ethic, and you know, just played his team part, and that's all you want from a goalkeeper. You saw Evan playing against Monaghan and Galway and Salt Hill this year, and in Bourne Cup games as well, and I think he's done really well. So he's there on merit, and if he's called upon, I know he'll do a great job.
What's the status of Diarmuid Connolly? I know you were saying earlier in the year that he was very much part of your plans. Hopefully it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Yeah, like Diarmuid has made a choice for himself, and we've always encouraged Dublin players to express themselves as individuals and to make the choice that's right for them, and we respect that. Whatever player decides to commit to the Dublin senior football team and inter-county demands are tough on players, or whether players decides to go elsewhere, that's their choice, and you know, we've always respected those decisions.
Would you, after the season is over, would you welcome him back, or is that a decision far too far down the line?
Oh yeah, we're just focusing on the challenge of Laois. You know, they've been so impressive this season so far, and you know, all of our focus has been on that game. There's the Laney Cup's at stake, and you know, the Leinster provincial games it's a fantastic competition. We're very proud of Leinster men in Dublin. We value the competition, and we're determined to try and get a solid performance on Sunday. You know, Laois said did what they had to do in their division this year. They went down and won it. They've probably 10 games maybe unbeaten this season so far. So that's probably the reflection of the squad and the determination that they have, and they've got a good blend of youth and experience as well in the squad. They're defensively very solid, well able to score as well, and have a solid bench. So it has the makings of a really good game for the supporters on Sunday.
That's Jim Gavin talking about the Laois game with Máire Trasny-Kelly, which obviously takes place on Sunday. Now, Andy Lee is with us to talk to us about his top 5 boxing movies of all time. Andy, how you doing?
Good, Jay. How are you?
No pressure here.
I know, yeah. I feel like I'm opening myself up for a lot of scrutiny here. But the truth is, I don't watch a lot of boxing movies. I wouldn't, just because it's boxing, I wouldn't go in and say, oh, I have to see that film, you know. If anything, it would kind of turn me away from it.
Because there's very few that are actually any good?
Yeah, a lot of them just tend to play on the cliches, and I don't know, I guess it's kind of hard to suspend your, you know, the reality or disbelief, whatever it is, but when it is good and when it's done right, it's definitely the best sport in terms of
movies.
Yeah, movies.
Yeah. Culture in general.
Cinematic. I think it's, and maybe that's just because anyone can relate to being in a fight, you know, and and then what you have to do to go through that, you know, I think.
You wanted to talk a bit about some of the ones that didn't work. So here's Jake Gyllenhaal in Southpaw.
yeah, in an orthodox stance. That was enough for me. I seen the preview. I looked at this and I said, oh, Southpaw, standing orthodox. I didn't even switch it on, but. No, there's a whole lot of probably good films, and I'm probably doing them a disservice that I didn't actually watch. Like, I know Vinnie Pazienza had a recent biography out. It's called Bleed for This. And he's got an incredible story. You know, he was paralysed and fought his way back, trained himself and fought his way back. It was
the Miles Teller movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, Miles Teller. Did you see it?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Like, I mean, we had him on the show actually, Vinnie Pazienza. Very interesting story. Very kind of like a three-dimensional guy.
Yeah, character,
yeah, almost like a Rocky Marciano type in terms of the 3D nature you get of him as a character and as a man, which sometimes often makes these movies so great. As in, like, have very obvious flaws with characters, which ultimately these are movies about boxing rather than a boxing movie to a certain extent, you know.
And that's one of my I have On the Waterfront, number 3, I think. That's questionable. Is that a boxing movie? You know,
we always included in this list of top 10 sports films.
Just the performance of Brando. It's you know, and it's really, you know, and boxing. I guess it is boxing is the plot driver, really. You know.
Well, that hinge scene in the whole thing where he confronts his brother.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most famous scenes in cinema.
Yeah,
that scene in the back of the car where he finally has the courage to confront his brother, and for a lot of boxers that's so on the nose because you have these relationships with a manager, or in his case his brother, which even makes it worse, and they're telling you what to do all the time. And a lot of fighters they need to be told what to do. You know, they just want guidance. You know, and all they want to do is train and think and fight. And they kind of you put your trust in somebody, and you kind of have to go with them blindly, no matter what they say. And then, if it comes to the point, and even if you have a suspicion that they don't have your best interests at heart, it's very hard to confront that. You know, it's like that teacher-pupil kind of dynamic. And that's why that scene is so powerful.
It's employer as well. Like, I mean, that's obviously an allegory for everything that's going on in the background with the workers who are getting completely ridden by in the dockyards. It's like the little man, no matter how hard he tries, always gets screwed.
Yeah.
And, like, that scene is iconic. And like, you know, you can kind of make the case that that's even better than your number one. I mean, we can do this in reverse order.
It's very hard to put any of these on the list, and there's so many other films that I didn't put on the list, like Fat City, which is, you know, it's a great book and it's a really good film as well.
I don't know Fat City at all. What's that?
It's a film with Stacey Cheech, he would have been like a Brando in his day himself, kind of a, you know, like a rebel kind of an actor, but it also has a young Jeff Bridges. You know, he's about 18 in it, so it's really his start.
It's got a 100% record on Rotten Tomatoes.
Really?
Yeah. I know it's only got like about 21 reviews or something, but still 21 out of 21 ain't bad.
Yeah.
It's one of the only movies I've seen that's got
like, I haven't put, like, what really started, like, what kept me, not what started it for me as a child, but, like, was my fantasy, the Rocky movies, you know, the Rocky franchise. I haven't put that on the list, which is probably wrong, because that did so much for boxing.
A Club of Lang here.
I know, yeah, and it's such a cultural, you know, reference point now, that Rocky Balboa.
Creed was decent.
Yeah, no.
Creed 2 announced yesterday.
The trailer. I didn't get past the first 15 minutes of Creed.
Right.
No, I just, whatever it was about, I just, nah. I don't know, like, you know, you get... Like,
Tony Belly didn't do it for you?
No, you give it, like, you know, this day and age, you don't have to sit through, like, years ago, if you've committed to a film, you're going to sit down and watch it, but, like, this day and age, there's so much good stuff that you can just, you know, skip it over, you know.
I don't know, I enjoyed, look, I mean, I watched Creed.
No, everyone speaks well of it, like, you know.
I didn't sit down and watch it, though. I kind of was wandering around doing other stuff and going, I'll come in and watch this scene, and then I went out and watched it. Like, I wasn't kind of sitting there glued to it. Yeah. But it was passable, I thought.
I must give it a second chance.
Maybe that's...
I don't know, I just...
tolerance for that is pretty low. So Rocky, I remember I saw Rocky 4 in cinema. The other Rockies I've only ever kind of seen after the fact, but like, that was kind of peak Cold War class.
Yeah.
It was just complete nonsense.
The training montage, you know, where Rocky's doing the very old school and Ivan Drago's going and doing all the modern techniques and stuff. And it was class. And then the death of Apollo Creed, and, you know, it had all those emotional triggers that you wanted to see, you know.
Yeah.
And my personal favourite was Rocky 3. It's probably not the best of the Rocky movies, but, you know, he got to fight Hulk Hogan, and he fought Club of Lang, you know, B.A. Brockus or whatever, you know, Mr. T, a.k.a. And I thought to me, that was my favourite, you know.
Why?
He goes back and he trains with Apollo, doesn't he? You know, he goes back to, like, the black tough gym and learns how to he learns how to box, really, you know, and gets rhythm and the montage of that training montage where he's in the gym and he looks really stupid at the start, can't even skip rope, and then he kind of conquers that, you know, I don't know, when you're a kid, I haven't probably seen it in, I don't know, 20 years or so, you know.
Just like you and the Kronk.
Yeah, that's, you know, it's kind of, I think it, like, I heard somewhere that it was kind of based on the Kronk, the gym they use.
Okay,
you know,
right.
But, yeah, it was really good film.
Let's go back to your top 5 and actually talk about these then. So, we can stick that up there. Number 5 is Cinderella Man. Number 4 is Somebody Up There Likes Me. Number 3 is On the Waterfront. Number 2 is Journeyman. And number 1 is Raging Bull. So let's talk about Journeyman, because this is, you've got a personal involvement with this.
Yeah, it's like, it's only been released earlier this year, and it was kind of limited release. And it's not a film a lot of people would have saw, but Paddy Considine, who wrote it, directed it, and acts in it, I would know him personally. He's been to a few of my fights, and there was a chance we could have got him on the show that just didn't work out. So we will get him in again just to ask him about, you know, get it from the horse's mouth. But yeah, I knew he was making a boxing film, so, you know, he started getting in touch with boxers, and we had some exchanges, you know, back and forth, and he'd come to a couple of my fights. But I went to see this film after I retired, and I couldn't be like. When I left the cinema, I was so happy that I was retired, because I couldn't imagine being in my position as an aging boxer, having watched this film, and Joe sent me the link of Michael
Bisping,
yeah. He referenced the movie in his decision to retire.
He said he got on a flight, watched the film, got off the flight, and retired. I was like,
I know.
So just explain the film, will you? Because
it centers around this character called Maddie Burton, and in a lot of ways, like when I watched the film, why I was so affected by it, there were so many parallels to my life and career, and how my life could have went had a fight gone the wrong way for me, especially later on when I had knockdowns against Jackson and against Quillen and Saunders,
Yeah.
He was WBO middleweight champion. He was married with a young daughter, and that's my life in a nutshell. And like he suffers after a fight, he wins the fight. I don't want to give any spoilers now, but he comes home and starts to get a really bad headache, and it turns out he has swelling on the brain, and he has to suffer through and deal with that, and come to terms with that. And the film is so on the he got so many of the little he really did his research, because so many of the little details, even down to like I was watching when I was watching the film, I was like, oh, look at that, I was just giving my wife a little nudge, and she would have seen it all. Like after he wins a fight, his wife comes to give him a hug, and he has to pull away because he's so sore.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that in a boxing film, but that's why the way it is, because you can barely breathe. Your body's so battered that to expand your rib cage it really hurts.
Yeah.
So all the small details are right, and he used a lot of boxing extras, a lot of boxing journalists in the film, and it just and coincidentally, Brendan Ingle, who recently passed away, plays his father in the film.
Right. Okay.
So it's a really nice touch there, It's another thing, it shows he goes back and watches footage of when he won the title, and what they do after the fight is they just go back to a room and celebrate. It's not a big just amongst themselves.
Yeah.
He's with his dad and they're all taking photos, and I have the exact same footage of me after I won the world title. So it was just so many things that I was like, oh, this is like a parallel. I know it's probably totally personal, but I'm not ashamed to admit it. I must have cried maybe 3 times during the film.
Right.
And I can't remember the last time I cried other than that,
Yeah.
for major things that happened to me. But the film is really emotive, and it will stay with you for a long time.
That's class. Well, hopefully we'll all get a chance to see it. Do you know if there's plans for it to...
I think it'll be re-released. I'm sure it'll come on DVD. It will be out soon. I think it might be finished as cinema release now. He was due to come over. I'd seen it in the Dublin Film Festival, so it should be out for a wider release soon, or a DVD release soon.
Apparently it's out on DVD, Joseph's just saying, so hopefully it hits Netflix or we can get it soon, because it's called Journeyman and it sounds great.
Yeah, it's a really good film, yeah.
Somebody up there likes me.
Yeah, that's just a personal favourite. I really
called it the hipster's choice.
No, I thought it's a great film. I loved it since I was about this big, so maybe I'm a bun. But it's just the performance of Paul Newman, and just the scenes of New York, the Lower East Side. It's the Rocky Graciano story, and how he, in his own life, he had been in trouble as a youth, had an abusive father, and then comes out, picks up boxing. He was getting in trouble with the law, and kind of had a knack for it, and went on to be middleweight world champion. So,
because there is another movie called Somebody Up There Likes Me. It's a really bad Nick Offerman movie from 2012, just such a popcorn American comedy flick. So I'm glad it is the boxing version of that, which I did assume. But the Paul Newman angle is this essentially launched his career to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It was one of his first feature films.
And I could watch him in anything. In terms of just this happens to be a boxing movie, but I think he's one of the greatest actors of all time. When you look at his catalogue of films, he's as good as they get.
Yeah. I didn't realise that Graziano was a contemporary of Jake LaMotta, that they were actually in juvie together.
Yeah, they would have been around New York at the same time, And,
and they both fight Sugar Ray Robinson as a key figure in both their careers.
He would have been, and a few other ones like Tony Gennaro and Tony Zale. They would have fought all this around the same time. So that was a truly great period for middleweights. But there is a connection between and there's another connection. There's a guy called Kevin Mahan who lives in New York, and I became friends with him when I would have been living in New York around 2009 to 2011, that kind of time. This guy would come to the gym and just watch me train, and I never would always be quiet. So eventually I would say, well, what's your name? And blah, blah, we got talking. And I eventually come to realise after knowing him for about 2 or 3 months that he played Tony Gennaro in Raging Bull.
All right.
Yeah, and he used to knock around with Tony Graciano and Tony Graciano's brother.
Right.
And so there is Yeah, he comes out. This guy was from West Virginia, an Irish American, never boxed in his life, but had a dream of being a boxer. Moved to New York at 17, was sleeping on the streets, and ended up training in Customato's gym. And wasn't really a fighter, wasn't really much of a boxer. But one day he just watched Taxi Driver, and he said he could relate to that film, being in New York and being alone. And then one day he walks Martin Scorsese, Jake LaMotta, and Rob De Niro, and they say, "Who's that kid in the ring?" And he said, "That's Kevin Mahan." He said, "Well, I want him to be trained with De Niro for the fight." And they eventually give him the part of Tony De Niro. People remember because he's the one that takes the beat, and he says, "He ain't pretty anymore."
Yeah.
That's him. That's Kevin. So that's my connection to
That's pretty
Raging
class.
Bull.
Yeah.
But this is just, without boxing, it's a great film. This is one of the all-time great films of all time.
It makes all the top 10 lists of top 10 movies of all time very regularly, and from time to time it kind of surges to number one depending on who's making the list.
You got with De Niro and Scorsese, it's a winning team, and then with Paul Schrader, the writer, it's a great, it's a great film. I don't know, I can't really say enough about it, but just the performances and what he put his body through, losing the weight, gaining weight, and just how he embodied that figure, and how he captured Jake LaMotta. I think Jake LaMotta, sometimes it happens that you become more famous because of not what you actually did in your career. People probably know Jake LaMotta more so because of this. He was the subject of the film.
Definitely, yeah. Without question.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the New York angle just on all of this, and kind of how that's so inextricably linked to a lot of these movies. And I think I recall Scorsese talking about On the Waterfront a few years ago. I'm not sure, was it Inside the Actor's Studio or something like that, where he starts to talk about On the Waterfront, as you say, not just a boxing movie, as a movie that informed his view of New York in a cinematic sense, that it was wait a minute, this society that I grew up in could actually be depicted in such a 3D way. It's not kind of stereotypically one-dimensional. This is something that kind of, I look at that character and I'm like, I know that guy, that's the guy that grew up down the street from me, or I know that guy, and it was accurate. It was kind of the thing that informed him when you look at his movies about the city, and kind of so inspirational when it comes to one of the greatest directors and his view of New York City, that to call them boxing films is almost doing them an injustice.
Yeah. There's so much, and that film, the screenplay is done by Bud Schulberg, who's a boxing writer himself. I would have met his son when I lived in New York through George Kimball.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of connections, and it is a small world in boxing. And boxing and movies, boxing and the movie business, they kind of flirt together. They kind of, they
There's a glamour from both of them.
I always say this, and it's such a all boxers want to be actors and all actors want to be boxers. They kind of have this weird appreciation, and it's kind of weird to see the two worlds meet, and I want to be like you, and the other guy's like, I want to be like you, know. But there are so many and I guess there's a lot of parallels in that when you go into the ring, you have to be somebody else, you have to act, and you have to perform, and it's a similar state, I guess, to be a good actor. You have to become somebody else.
Yeah, you did stuff in the Fringe Festival, didn't you?
Yeah, I had dabbled a little bit in acting, and I did a bit in the theatre festival. I was in a play called Chekhov's First Play, and it was really great. I was more nervous before I walked out onto that stage than I was for any of my fights across my life.
What was your role?
I was basically playing myself in a hyper kind of a hyper realistic version of myself, and I wasn't saying my own, I had to learn lines and recite lines, and it was daunting, but I have to admit the buzz I got after it, I was actually it was nearly better than most of my fights, because most fights you win and you're like, I was expecting
also
to win,
you don't get your head beaten off you.
Yeah, as well, yeah.
Somebody can give you a hug afterwards, you're not flinching.
Yeah, but I'd prefer to take a beating than go up there and choke or forget a line. I'd prefer to take a few shots in the face.
Was it something addictive?
No, I enjoyed it.
Would you do it again?
No, I don't know. I shouldn't be revealing all this, but I actually am doing a part-time course in Bow Street. Yeah, in Bow Street, acting in drama school. Yeah, it's in Smithfield, and my wife signed me up as a Christmas present. She knew that I would enjoy it.
So career guidance.
Yeah. She was probably like, come on now. This was before I retired, and she was like, yeah. But so that's filling up a lot of my time, I'm doing that 2 days a week, and yeah.
Who are you watching?
I'm watching everything. We actually watched the scene with On the Waterfront where Marlon Brando where he's talking to the girl and he's trying to chat her up, and it's like you said, what Scorsese says, like, you can just relate to him because he's just like a young New York kind of a guy, and I've met those guys so many times. Like, I'd seen the film a lot when I was younger, but just rewatching it recently, and he's walking down the street with the girl, he's rapping to her, he's trying to, trying to anything he can to get to, and she takes off a glove, and he takes a glove, and like he's on the swings, and he puts the glove on, and it's like, I was like, whoa, that was like a real kind of sexual innuendo, like, and I'm not sure if he improvised that or whatever it was, but a great film. Yeah, great film.
And have you any other, was there any TV experience or any other acting?
I don't want to reveal too much. It doesn't really, I'm being part, I don't want to be part of the cliche of the boxer who goes into acting now, so I just keep stump.
You haven't got an IMDb page yet,
no?
Don't. That's the next step.
No.
We can set it up, don't worry. But John Duddy's doing it.
John Duddy's, and a lot of boxers do try to go into acting. And I said it's probably an easy transition, because even within Bow Street and the course that I'm doing, it's all about preparation and ownership, and it's a very I can just relate everything to boxing and how it relates to boxing.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. It's very transferable.
I know I've probably skipped a lot. It's not when we were Kings. It's probably one of the greatest.
That's the thing.
It's a documentary. I don't know.
It ruins boxing movies, I think, a little bit after. The films that come after that have to be absolutely sensational, because When We Were Kings is like a high watermark for documentary making, for boxing, for history, for storytelling. It's it's the perfect film. You can't there's no flaws in that. And I saw that in the cinema, so I don't know if I'm ever going to have the same experience again, where you're just like, holy shit, that's amazing.
You should definitely put that back on in the Lighthouse at some point, maybe the next anniversary of Ali or something, because, as you say, missing the opportunity to see that in the cinema is one of the biggest regrets.
There's for a lot, boxing movies kind of come along in spurts where you get 5 boxing movies in the space of a year, and then there'll be 2 or 3 years where there won't be a boxing movie. And I always thought there was room for a real true. I think there is, but as far as I'm concerned, Journeyman really nails it on the head. The head. There's in terms of all the small details and the boxing. The boxing itself. That's one thing I'm always critical of. And The Fighter is a great film, but the boxing is well, they did get a lot of the details right in terms of the ring and the shorts he wore and some of the work and Christian Bale's performance as Dickie Eklund is sensational. But in terms of a film and a boxing film, the boxing was just, Mark Wahlberg, I think his technique wasn't good enough, and his body didn't look, you can see, you have to have, the boxer's body was too muscular, and same with Jake Gyllenhaal in Southpaw, and I heard all these stories about how he was going through this training regime, and he was training in Church Street in New York, but it looks like to me, he was on juice. Yeah. It looks to me, because you can tell the type of muscle it is, that it's not from boxing, it's more, you can see it there, he looks more like a power lifter or something, I wouldn't say.
As opposed to a fighter.
Yeah.
Although a lot of fighters are starting to look like that these days. And do people come to you and ask you about, can you give us a bit of guidance about this?
Yeah, well, I would have talked to Paddy Considine a little bit about that kind of thing, and I know he came to a lot of fights, and he got, he did pick up a lot from going to the fights in terms of, even in Journeyman, he uses Coogan Cassius for his interview, and, got a lot of the extras from there. And there's a film actually being made by Kieran Cassidy, who's a young Dublin director. It's called Tomato Can, and it's a great story. It's a short film about a kind of a washed-up boxer who gets stuck with his daughter, minding his daughter for the day of a fight, and he's a journeyman, he's a tomato can. It's a great film. It's going to be a great film. It's not out yet. And they got Thomas McCartney, who's a Belfast boxer, to play the role. I wasn't available, so. Yeah.
Cass is a genius. He's made some absolutely brilliant radio documentaries. And so that's.
There you go.
Was he actually?
Actually, Jake Gyllenhaal.
That's Jake Gyllenhaal, yeah.
It's not. It doesn't even look like him.
Yeah, it looks.
Seine Linke ist seine starkste Waffe. So that's obviously the German poster. But holy shit.
I haven't seen it. Is he a southpaw in the movie, or is it just a poster?
I'm sure he is. I haven't watched it either. I saw the trailer, and his wife gets killed in a press conference, it seems, and I was like, yeah,
no thanks.
I don't need to watch this.
So somebody threw a water bottle at her or something.
I got Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I've queued up on Netflix. So
right. Okay. Yeah, that's a bit of a grim start.
Okay, so Raging Bull's number one, Journeyman, On the Waterfront, Somebody Out There Likes Me, Cinderella Man, we haven't talked about that. Russell Crowe said that for a screen actor, being in a boxing movie is like being in Hamlet. He said it's his favourite role. So Cinderella Man is J.J. Braddock, is that it?
Yeah, J.J. Braddock and James J. Braddock. And it's a story of, set in the Depression. It's a true story and about a man's struggle and his perseverance, and he gets a shot, and like a lot of fighters, and it's related to my own, gets a shot out of the blue and kind of takes it, when he's down to his lowest ebb, and takes the chance. And there's a foot, not a foot, but a bit of trivia, he did very well, even though he won the title. He defended against Joe Louis shortly after, and he only had 2 fights after that. He negotiated for himself to earn 10% of Joe Louis's future earnings.
Right.
For the next decade.
Right.
After the fight. So he kind of he did a great job, and his manager's played by Paul Giamatti. I think his name's something Gould or something like that. But he has a great part, and he's a great actor, Paul Giamatti, and they're dynamic. So yeah, it's definitely up there. Like that and the fighter would be on even terms, I think. And there's so many. Requiem for a Heavyweight with Anthony Quinn, and just boxing has always kind of been, I think.
Kieran Cunningham was talking to us, is tweeting us about the Emil Griffith movie that Lenny Abramson is working on. He's bought the rights to Donald McRae's book.
Yeah, I spoke to Lenny Abramson about that. You asked me, I forgot. Yeah, I had dinner with Lenny Abramson, and he was just asking about boxing and what it's like, and the book is really, really good book.
It's an incredible story.
Yeah, it sounds like. And I'd met Emil Griffin a lot of times.
Had you?
Yeah,
in
New York. He would towards the end of his life, he would have been pretty not down and out, but living from week to week or whatever. He wouldn't have had the most affluent lifestyle towards the end, and he would have always hung around the New York scene and been at fights. And I always wondered, it was a bit not that it's a lot, I always wondered why people were a little bit in the boxing circles were a little bit I didn't know he was gay. I didn't know he was gay, and I guess it was an open secret in boxing or whatever it was. And I was so thrilled to meet him, and I'd always chat to him. And this was Emil Griffin, it was just all-time great Hall of Fame fighter. I think he's won 5 world titles in different divisions. And
there's still homophobia in boxing, really, isn't there?
There is, but more so back then, and more so then.
And from the older guys, more
older guys, they were always kind of standoffish with him, and I always wondered why there wasn't such more of a bigger deal. And it wasn't until after, I read the book and I realised, I didn't know he was gay, and it wouldn't have made a difference, but then it kind of made sense, it kind of just clicked. But
did you ever talk to him? So, for people who are unfamiliar, Emil Griffith killed somebody in the ring live on national television. It's like when boxing is still on every Saturday evening, and it's millions and millions and millions and millions of people are watching Saturday night, 8 o'clock. He kills a guy in the ring, and the guy he kills in the ring is a guy who in the build-up to the fight, had accused him of being gay publicly, and Griffith had said, did Griffith say I was going to kill you?
Yeah,
he was definitely I'll kill you, and then he does kill him.
Yeah, and it affected him for the rest of his career. And I know the film will be being made soon, but there's a great documentary on it called Man on Fire. And if you can watch, I think it's on YouTube, you can watch it, and it's in parts on YouTube, and it's really that's really an affecting.
Did you talk to him about that?
I never talked to him about that. I'm not going to just watch.
Oh, you killed a guy in the ring.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure he was trying to, he's been living with it and trying not to remind himself of it every day. But
he was into fashion as well. That's the other thing.
Yeah, he was a flamboyant character at the time, and he was married twice, I think, and has kids and stuff. But it wasn't until later on in life that he was kind of openly living as a gay man. But that incident where he killed a man in the ring, it affected him for the rest of his career. And he says in the documentary, I could never fully hit anybody after that, And his career does definitely take a downturn after that fight.
It's got to be near completion at this point. I've heard Abramson talking about that for years now at this point.
Yeah, I know
everything takes ages though.
It takes a while, yeah. So maybe he'll cast me as somebody in the
that's the type of thing that you kind of would also happily sit and watch a 12-part HBO/Netflix series about, I wonder, is that the next thing where we actually stop talking just about boxing movies, but we start seeing good boxing TV series, like, you know.
Yeah, well, I know there was Counterpunches on Netflix, and I haven't fully watched it, even though I'm in it. Did you see it?
Yeah, I've only seen that bit.
Jay Bugler he's a New York director. He made it, and it follows 3 fighters, one professional, one amateur. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And another one. One is a champion fighter, which is Kid Chocolate, who I fight in the duration of the documentary. And one is an up-and-coming guy, 10 pro, and one's an amateur. And I just skip through. I just flick through Netflix, to see my little scene, see what. And they I was going to pull him up on it, but they completely edited the film. Looked like I got hammered. It didn't include all my knockdowns and
controversial draw as Kid Chocolate batters Andy Lee.
So hopefully there is it is, and I know there's a lot of documentaries, and they're probably good. I haven't watched them. Like Sergio Martinez has a documentary. There's a film about Roberto Duran, Hands of Stone, which John Dudley acts in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he plays Ken Buchanan.
Okay.
In the film.
So that's a movie as opposed to a doc.
That's a movie. Yeah,
right.
It's a feature film, and. There's so many, like Clarissa Shields, the female fighter, the 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She has a Netflix documentary. I think it's called Tyrannosaur or something like that. Or Tyrannosaurus Rex.
We might do documentaries separately then at some point in the day. After the controversy dies down from your top 5 for this one today.
Has there been much hit up on the...
Not yet, not yet. No, it's early days. We'll once we put the list out, though.
Once you put this out at prime time, I'll be getting crucified.
Andy, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us. So we'll stick that top 5 up on offtheball.com. So here's Matt Williams talking about why Ireland need to play more attacking rugby before we get to Micheál Quirke, who's standing by.
How can you argue? He's a phenomenal coach with a phenomenal record. And it's really funny, whenever I say something about, look, I think the team could attack more, everyone defends Joe like he's a saint and can't do it. He's a great human being. But you can still have an observation on the game. Now, Australia gave away almost 2-1 penalties. Australia had one of the worst games they've had in a long time. They very rarely do that 2 weeks in a row. They're coming to the Sydney Football Stadium. They've lost one game at the Sydney Football Stadium in almost 20 years. Now, they don't play there all the time. It is a fantastic place to play Sydney. To play rugby. It's a sellout. It's 45,000 capacity. They'll probably break the record.
Yeah.
The pubs around Paddington, the Sydney Football Stadium, will be packed. It's exactly like Dublin. It's all terrace housing, pubs on every corner. It will be a fantastic atmosphere. And if Ireland don't come out and play attacking rugby, they'll lose.
Okay.
Now, they're capable of playing it. If they go to Eden Park one day and they don't play attacking rugby, they'll lose. When they come up against New Zealand, whether it be in the final or a semi-final at the World Cup in Japan next year, if they don't play attacking rugby, they'll lose. That's my only point.
Okay.
The team's going great, but it's not going to win you a World Cup.
Okay.
And this team is capable of winning one.
I think that's a bang-on point from Matt Williams, and hopefully they will play attacking rugby on Saturday, because it would be a bit of a bad end to the entire year if they don't manage to win this series now, having put themselves in a position to do so. Right, let's move on. It's a massive weekend of Gaelic football action. Owen Sheehan controversially picked his 2 Super 8 groups and left out both Tyrone and Cork, which means that
Cork's not that controversial.
Which means that Cork are going to lose this weekend in the Munster football final. Micheál Quirke is on the line to talk to us. Micheál, good morning to you.
Morning, guys.
Dara O'Shea in his column was predicting a 5 or 6 point win for Kerry. Owen has obviously rubbished their chances of reaching even the Super 8s. It looks like Kerry have finally got over their need to talk up Cork in advance of a Munster football final.
Yeah, it seems to be something that's falling away small, but all right, yeah. I suppose it's difficult to talk them up too much. Other years at least you got some bit of context for it. Obviously, they had a really good performance against Tipperary, which kind of surprised a lot of people, because I think a lot of people were figuring that the way Tipperary were going, they were probably looking at the second best team in Munster, and they put a big score up on them and they performed really well, and so I suppose that kind of caught everybody by surprise a small little bit. So it's not a little bit like Kerry. We're not really sure of what they're going to bring, but they tend to give you this big one big performance every year, and you don't know if their game against Tipperary was it.
What's the truth about where Kerry are? I mean, it's very hard to ask and answer that question after such an easy win against Clare. And just even thinking back to last year, they obviously had a fairly straightforward victory against Cork in the Munster Championship. So Super 8 is definitely something that's going to suit Kerry. But what's your assessment of where they really are?
I mean, you can only base it on what we've seen, obviously, in the past in the championship game against Clare, and I mean, after that game, you're saying they're the best football team in the world after that performance. But obviously, the truth isn't exactly there. I mean, this game will give us more of an idea, more of a context. I would have assumed Cork would have come out in this game and played somewhat more defensively, even though Ron McCarthy and all the sound bites kind of coming from Clancy and these guys don't seem to kind of agree with that. They seem to focus on their own game and play their own way. And I think if they do that we could, not see a hammering like we saw against Clare, but we could see another kind of maybe a comfortable victory for Kerry if that happens. And again, I don't think we'll be any the wiser as to how good or bad Kerry really are. I mean, they put Cork in context. Obviously, they were beaten by Clare earlier in this year. They were down in Division 2, nothing kind of happening for them, and then they've won big performance against Tipperary. So I'm not really sure. Even if Kerry win this game, we can be saying, look, Jesus, Kerry are ready to go against Dublin. It's just hard to know until we get to those games against Galway, hopefully, and so on in that Super 8.
Yeah. So the Galway game is obviously a game that we're all really looking forward to at this point, and I know we're kind of maybe taking Cork a little bit for granted, but let's just briefly assume that the form lines hold and Kerry do make it there. That Galway game is actually going to be a genuine test against a Galway team who have progressed from last year and who won't be spooked, I think, by what happened to them last year, but who will actually see that as a motivation, hopefully.
Yeah, well, it'll be the big test for them, obviously. I mean, they played Kerry in the quarterfinal last year, and I know we really shouldn't be talking about Kerry and Galway before a Munster final, but Donaghy himself destroyed Galway, that day, and they've obviously put a huge amount of work into their defensive scheme, and whoever it is, whether even if it is Cork and Luke Connolly and Brian Hurley and Colm O'Neill, like Galway's whole deal now is let's stop the opposition first and let's build from there. But I mean, if you get that game as the first game of the Super 8 with Kerry and Galway above in Croke Park, I mean, that's what that month is going to be about, and those big hitter games, which is something we all want to see, like the hurling, I suppose,
Yeah, like the last time Kerry played in Páirc Uí Chaoimh was obviously 2014, and I think when you look at the context of the new generation of Kerry football, that was obviously a pivotal day, Mike, because you had the minors winning that day, unexpectedly easy. It was their first Munster title in a while, but you also had kind of the display of how important the number 11 jersey is to Kerry, because Declan O'Sullivan was absolutely sensational for Kerry that day, and I feel since 2014 they haven't quite replaced the number 11 jersey until this point, until Sean O'Shea comes in, and obviously his point scoring has been the most impressive part of his game that we've seen so far in the league and in the game against Clare. But to what extent do you feel that he can be a playmaker for this Kerry team and get the best out of the likes of David Clifford and James O'Donoghue and Kieran Donaghy when he comes on?
I think his playmaking is his big point. I mean, I know he can score off 2 feet and stuff like that, but his ability to see the play and see the field and to be able to pick passes and get guys involved is what separates him from other guys. Obviously, he's got all the other attributes as well that you'd want, but he's the real deal. And this is going to be another big test for him in terms of his learning curve. And we saw through that National League, and I've made the point before, where even when it might have made sense to switch him out of centre forward, Fitzmaurice left him there to give him as many looks at different oppositions and different defences as he could possibly get, because he knows coming down the line this guy is going to be a mainstay at centre forward, and we want to give him every opportunity to see something that's going to come ahead of it.
It's strange when you look at the coverage going into last year's Munster final, because I know Gooch ahead of the game and Darragh O'Shea ahead of the game were both genuinely fearful of what Cork might do in that Munster final. I don't think it was cute tourism, whereas this year it seems that there's much more of there is kind of a different view around it, where we're kind of talking about Kerry versus Galway already, but this is in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Cork are just hammered Tipperary. It seems that this is the time to be a cute hooer, so to speak, before a game. And not even so, there is actual evidence to suggest that this could be a tight game.
Yeah, look, it's just, I don't know. It's really hard to know. I've been kind of, you're waiting for Cork to kind of come and to make a big statement, and maybe that game against Tipperary was it. Maybe that was their start of a new dawn under Ron McCarthy and the Nemo guys and Luke Connolly, and they're all going to come in and make something really, really, happen for them. But it's just hard to believe it until we can see it. And you'd imagine Blown Park Equipe, their first big football game, in their new stadium, and there's people talking about it might be half full because they've spent too much money with the hurlers, and they know this team is going to do, and it's just got that kind of an inevitable kind of vibe to it that Kerry are going to go down there. We're going to moan and bitch about the traffic and the parking, and you're going to win the game relatively comfortably, hopefully, and get out of Dodge again. And it's just, and it's dangerous. It's a dangerous mindset to be in, that it's kind of a box to be ticked as opposed to a game to kind of look forward to. But I'm sure, obviously, from Kerry's point of view and Fitzmaurice's point of view, he's looking for a 6th Munster title. It's a competition that's always, he's stood in good stead with that one, and he's built up his bank of experience through Munster. And for a lot of those guys, there's about 5 or 6 of them don't have a medal, which is unusual for a starting team with Kerry. So for them, they're not going to take the game as blasé or as lightly as we are, and I don't think that's going to be much of an issue for them.
One of the other things that strikes me, we were obviously guessing what the draw is going to be and positing potential Super 8 groups a little bit earlier on, but while the romance of some of those so-called weaker counties winning games up to this point in the championship has been great, at this point we do actually want the stronger teams to come through, so that we do have the better teams playing home games, be that Tyrone in Omagh or be that Mayo in Castlebar, that actually, while it would be great for Tipperary to beat Mayo for the championship, and for us in the absolute mayhem that is going to be the Super 8s, we kind of need those big teams there to actually give each other the opportunity to improve against each other and to test each other out.
Yeah, and that's the way, even the way the qualifiers are going, it looks like the way it's going to be, it's setting up for that. I mean, Tipperary and Mayo is probably maybe Carlow, it's the biggest one of the qualifier games that you could see some potential for a kind of an upset to a big team. Now, with the hammering they took against Cork, you'd imagine Tipperary will come out and make a bit of a shape and make a bit of an effort. But, Mayo, as always, even though we keep writing them off, they seem to have kind of rejuvenated themselves a little bit again, that you'd imagine they'd get over that one. And if you do get yourself to a situation that it looks most likely that you're going to have those teams that you mentioned, Monaghan are in the mix, Mayo, Tyrone, I mean, there's going to be, whether it's Kerry or Cork, there's going to be big games happening kind of week in and week out, and it's like everybody's in a rush to get there now, and we're kind of, we're forgetting about maybe Fermanagh and Ulster and Laois in Leinster, while they're big moments for their season, and the same with Cork. It's kind of everybody's anxious just to roll on to those big games.
Yeah, it's true. And like Kerry in Clonus against Monaghan, and Kerry playing Mayo in Killarney, and Kerry playing Galway in, the hurling has definitely completely been the main focus of the GAA season so far, but that's about to completely switch, and we're about to get the benefits of this. There was one point earlier that somebody made the point that Dubs are going to play 4 weeks and 5 to reach an All-Ireland final if they are going to make it there, and that will test squads in a way that we haven't seen squads tested so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially a Dublin squad, when you're missing the likes of a Diarmuid Connolly and stuff. That's going to be a test. But look, should have about 65 in their squad. They'll surely cope for a couple of weeks to Dubs. But it's really, like, the hurling was so fascinating from everybody's point of view, and it was great to watch these big teams playing each other week in, week out, and it really gave you a sense of, like, Jesus, like, a Super Sunday in the Premiership, every, the big games, United, like, big games, and now it's just completely flipped on its head, and the football hopefully is going to. And it's strange that and I know, like, the provincial finals used to always be the big games, and they're the big moments that everybody wanted to play in, and now it's just, and everybody's doing it, it's just a case of, can we get the provincial finals out of the way so we can move on to the next stage to see exactly what this whole thing throws up to us.
When you look at the Ulster final this weekend, Mike, Fermanagh against Donegal have been hugely impressive, and some of the young players they brought in have really stood out from Declan Bonner's perspective. Ultimately, though, the winner of this, first up, Croke Park against the Dubs. We saw what they did to Monaghan last year in the surrounds of Croker, and you do fear whoever comes through, they could meet a similar fate. Is there anything to suggest that Donegal have reached a level, if they win on Sunday, because that is a big if they win on Sunday, that they can go toe-to-toe with Dublin 3 weeks later in Croke Park and potentially even win the game, because we've been let down so badly by some of the Ulster teams in Croke Park in recent years?
Yeah, it's a big. I mean, look, obviously they're not going to be looking past Fermanagh, and Monaghan might have done the same thing and got caught, obviously. So you'd imagine Declan Bonner in his first year, kind of a fresh start. Like winning an Ulster title to them is going to be like winning an Ulster title. I think is still, maybe I shouldn't say it, but an Ulster title seems more important to the Ulster teams than maybe the Munster does, or certainly the Leinster does. You know, those competitions have probably diminished somewhat because of the dominance of Kerry and Dublin and those. You know, Connacht probably less so with Mayo, but certainly the Ulster one is the most open, and I think they place more value in that Ulster title than maybe the other ones. But if they whoever gets out of there, if it's Donegal, you think they would probably be more equipped offensively to put up a game to the Dubs. Fermanagh, you know, while they can't Monaghan, I'm just not sure they have enough scoring power to really trouble them. Whereas if you get Donegal there with the freshness and the new guys they have, and with McBrearty flying still, and Murphy and Jamie Brennan, these guys, they can ask questions. Now whether they can beat them or not, you know, I'm not so sure until we see them slaying. It's hard to back anybody to do it.
One last question. You had a great piece about the influence of basketball coaching and the stuff that you can actually take from basketball. It's applicable to GAA, and clearly made the point that this has been in the GAA for a number of years. At Dublin, at Roscommon, obviously, and Kerry have gone that direction as well. Are you starting to see the impact of the influence of the basketball coaching on how Kerry are defending just yet? It's hard to read too much into the Clare game, obviously.
Yeah, it's difficult. And like there wasn't hugely obvious things during the National League. Now I'm not sure how much James Whelan kind of had involvement during the league, but and the Clare game was just such a cakewalk. It was difficult. I'm sure as you get on now to this game against Cork and to the to the Super 8s, I think you'll see more of it. Obviously, the way they set up on kickouts was something that was very new, and it was very structural, and it was very kind of a zone defence, and it takes a bit of organisation, and it was obviously something that maybe came from him, or that element, and that's good. I mean, that's if you're bringing in guys who are coming with different ideas, something that Kerry haven't done before to that extent, and kickouts, then that's good. And you'd imagine against Cork we might see another layer on top of it, and it's just they're small little bits and pieces that you'll be able to start picking out as the games become bigger, but and they're just basic principles that you need to build on. And I'm sure like these guys are training so much now, you'd imagine they got to be putting all this stuff into their repertoire.
Mike, great stuff. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks a million.
No bother, guys. Take it easy.
Neil Cork giving us some thoughts there ahead of the weekend of GAA action. OTB AM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Coming up tonight on the radio between 7 and 10, it's obviously John Giles and Graham Hunter on Thursday night. All the usual Thursday night goodness, including our bumper GAA weekend preview, and World Cup Daily at 12:30.
Yeah, it's Messi all the way. Can Argentina finally get their first win of the tournament? Well, we'll find out. We'll be crossing over to John Duggan, who's in the surrounds of Nizhny Novgorod,
I think they're going out in the group stages.
I don't agree with that.
No?
I think there is a kick in this team. I don't think they're going to go very far.
Messi looks tired.
Yeah,
fed up.
There was a great stat actually this morning in, I think it was Barney Ronay's piece, because obviously we'd had all the amount of running that Russia had did and all those stats, but Messi has ran less than everybody else who's played 90 minutes in the opening 7 days of the tournament in terms of outfield players. That's what he does, though, isn't it? Like his heat map is definitely like him in his tiny little area, and then suddenly exploding into. He's top of the dribble charts. He's made more runs into the attacking third than anybody else. So there is a flip side to that.
Statistics.
Yeah.
My favourite thing on Twitter over the last couple of days was a clip from Fernando Rickson's book. So I think was it Rob from PA who had read Rob Harris had read Fernando Rickson's book. I'm not sure, I don't want to miscredit that, but basically saying that when I was playing football in Russia, we got injections all the time. I felt absolutely amazing after them. They made me run faster, they made me concentrate better, they made me recuperate much easier. I'm sure it was all totally legal. The guy who was giving it to us was the Russian team doctor, so obviously it was completely legit. And, they were vitamins.
And I've never slept since.
My insides have rotted away and did a little...
But no, it was all okay. Kind of like Arsene Wenger giving his players vitamins when he first came to Arsenal, right?
Well, I'm sure they were actually vitamins. But at this point about not jumping to conclusions about the Russians because they run more than everybody else, we can jump to conclusions about Russia because of Russia's track record in doping. That's why everybody's jumping to conclusions because of what happened in Sochi, because of what happened with the state-sponsored doping programs that made them the preeminent nation when it came to winning medals in Olympic Games over a 40-year period.
It's not like kind of taking any German suspicion and saying, well, what happened behind the Iron Curtain 40 years ago? It's kind of like, do you remember what happened in this legitimate country, which is an actual host city where we had the biggest evidence of state-sponsored doping ever 4 years ago? There might be grounds for suspicion once again because, it's 4 years later.
And they're doing such a great job of hiding everything.
Yeah, well, as I say, it all comes down to just being a big country. A lot of place to run, a lot of place to hide,
and the bears.
And a lot of bears to fight.
Yeah, that was it. That was the best point. I hope that's all you've taken away from today, that Russia are brilliant at sport because they get to wrestle with bears. Owen, thanks.
Thank you.
We'll be back tomorrow. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Good luck.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.